The Arabian sun was a merciless hammer, beating down on the steel-gray skin of the USS Thomas Hudner. Below, the Strait of Hormuz was a sheet of glass, its placid surface belying the suffocating tension that clung to the air like humidity. On the bridge, Captain Eva Rostova watched the coastline of Iran, a hazy brown smudge on the horizon. For 3 days, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer had been on station, a lone sentinel in the world's most volatile maritime choke point. Her mission was simple in its wording, yet infinitely complex in its execution: ensure freedom of navigation. In reality, it was a high-stakes game of chicken, and the other driver was the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. They had been playing the game for 72 hours. Small, nimble, fast-attack craft, little more than speedboats laden with heavy machine guns and rocket launchers, would dart out from the coastline, buzzing the American warship like angry hornets. They would come within a few hundred yards, their crews shouting taunts over loudhailers, their wakes churning the turquoise water into a frothy white. Each time, the Hudner's crew went to a heightened state of alert. Each time, Captain Rostova held her nerve, her orders crisp and unwavering. Maintain course and speed. Do not escalate. Document their posture. Her voice, calm and measured, was a steadying force against the thrum of adrenaline in the Combat Information Center. The ship's darkened, screen-filled heart. Inside the CIC, Lieutenant Commander Michael Gunner Davis, the tactical action officer, orchestrated the ship's senses. He was a man who seemed to have been born for this room, his eyes flicking between the massive blue-lit screens that displayed the tactical picture. Every blip was a piece of information. Commercial tankers plodding along the shipping lanes, civilian aircraft in designated corridors, and the angry red icons of the IRGCN boats. Captain Tao, bogies are closing again. Vector 190, they're running hot. No response to bridge-to-bridge calls. Rostova's voice came back over the comm, devoid of emotion. Understood, Gunner. Keep me appraised. What's their posture? Aggressive, ma'am. Very aggressive. Bows high, weapons uncovered. They look like they're on an attack run. This was the razor's edge. The rules of engagement were clear, but they were also a lawyer's paradise of nuance and interpretation. The IRGCN boats had to demonstrate clear hostile intent or commit a hostile act. Firing a weapon was a clear line. But what about locking a fire control radar or maneuvering into a launch position? Rostova was responsible for the lives of over 300 sailors, a $2 billion warship, and potentially the opening shots of a new world war. She would not be the one to fire first. She had given her crew that promise. The United States would not be the aggressor, but she had also promised them they would come home. The unspoken corollary was that if the Iranians crossed that line, the response would be neither proportional nor restrained. It would be final. The tension peaked on the afternoon of the fourth day. The heat was at its most oppressive. A new element had joined the fray. An Iranian drone, a slow-moving propeller aircraft, began to circle the Hudner high overhead. It was an unsubtle reminder that they were being watched from every angle. The fast boats began another one of their harassing runs, but this time, something was different. They were more coordinated, fanning out in a classic swarm tactic designed to overwhelm a defender's sensors and weapon systems. In the CIC, Gunner Davis felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Captain, I've got new contacts, multiple new contacts. They're not boats, land-based. I think we're being painted. Coastal battery fire control radar, bearing 030. On the bridge, Rostova raised her binoculars. The Iranian coastline shimmered in the heat haze. There was nothing to see but sand and rock. But she knew that hidden in the folds of that terrain were camouflage bunkers and mobile launchers, the teeth of the Iranian anti-access area denial strategy. Acknowledged, Teo. All stations, brace for impact. Stand by for immediate response. She was giving the order to prepare for the blow, still holding back, waiting for the undeniable proof. It was the longest few seconds of her life. The air itself seemed to crackle. The drone continued its lazy circles overhead. The boats closed in. The radar lock was a persistent electronic scream in the ears of her sensor operators. Then it came. Missile launch. Bearing 030. I have a smoke plume. Repeat. Missile in the air. The shout from the radar console was sharp, punctuated by the piercing shriek of an alarm that sliced through the ship. Time seemed to warp. For Rostova, the moment was crystalline. The line had been crossed. The ambiguity was gone. They had fired. Her decision was not even a thought. It was a reflex honed by 2 decades of training. Her voice was ice. Engage! That single word unleashed the full, terrifying power of the Aegis combat system. For the IRGCN, it was as if they had prodded a sleeping dragon and woken a god. The USS Thomas Hudner, which had appeared so passive and restrained for days, transformed into an engine of breathtakingly efficient violence. The ship's superstructure structure bristled with activity. Panels slid open on the forward and aft decks, revealing the 96 cells of the Mark 41 vertical launch system. Before the Iranian anti-ship missile had even reached the apex of its trajectory, two SM-6 interceptors blasted out of their cells on pillars of white-hot fire and smoke. They climbed at nearly 4 times the speed of sound, their powerful boosters pushing them into the upper atmosphere. The SPY-1D radar, the multi-phased phased array system that formed the core of Aegis, tracked the incoming threat with inhuman precision, feeding a torrent of data to the interceptors. The Iranian missile, a sea-skimming design, never stood a chance. High over the strait, the first SM-6's warhead detonated, a silent, expanding ball of fire in shrapnel that shredded the incoming weapon into a cloud of metallic confetti. The second SM-6, arriving a fraction of a second later, flew through the debris field, its seeker finding no target and self-destructing as programmed. The entire defensive engagement, from launch to kill, lasted less than 90 seconds. But the Hudner was not just defending, it was counterattacking. Even as the SM-6s were climbing, Gunner Davis was orchestrating the retribution. Surface Action Group, engage all hostile surface contacts. Land attack, execute mission package Alpha. Air Boss, launch the birds. Hellfire loadout. From the aft VLS cells, the distinctive boxy shapes of Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles were ejected by gas pressure before their booster rockets ignited, sending them roaring into the sky. One after another, 8 Tomahawks arced over the destroyer, their boosters falling away as their small turbofan engines spooled up, settling them into a sea-skimming flight profile just 50 feet above the waves. They flew not toward the smoke plume, but toward the coordinates of the fire control radar that had painted the Hudner, toward the command and control bunkers that gave the orders, and toward the reload facilities and barracks that supported them. Their flight was a quiet, inexorable promise of destruction arriving in 30 minutes. Simultaneously, the ship's formidable 5-inch gun swiveled with menacing speed and opened fire. Its shells, guided by radar and GPS, were not aimed at the small boats, but were programmed for air bursts above and around them, creating a lethal steel cage. The concussions alone were enough to swamp the smaller craft, the shrapnel tearing through their unarmored hulls and exposed crews. From the flight deck, the rotors of an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter, already spinning, bit into the air. It lifted off, banked hard, and streaked towards the now panicked and scattering IRGCN flotilla. Slung under its stub wings were Hellfire missiles. The helicopter's sensors designated the targets. A laser painted the lead boat. A missile dropped, its rocket motor fired, and it flew unerringly to the point of light. The boat vaporized in a flash of orange and black. The Seahawk's crew was methodical, moving from one target to the next. In the space of 3 minutes, the sea where the swarm had been was littered with burning wreckage and floating debris. The harassing hornets had been swatted from the sky. High above, the circling drone found itself the target of an SM-2 missile, a weapon normally used against high-performance aircraft. Fired from the Hudner, it was absurd overkill, but the message was unambiguous. Your eyes are now closed. The drone disappeared in a small, almost anticlimactic puff. The entire engagement, from the moment the Iranian missile was launched to the point where the last IRGCN boat was sunk, had taken less than 5 minutes. In the CIC, the cacophony of alarms was replaced by the calm, professional litany of battle damage assessment, TAO operations. All hostile surface tracks are persecutrix. TIO air. Helo reports all designated targets destroyed. Returning to station. TIO strike. Tomahawks are feet dry, proceeding to target. Captain Rostova stood on the bridge wing, the smell of burnt propellant sharp in the air. The sun was beginning to dip lower, casting long shadows. The Strait of Hormuz was quiet again. The placid, glassy surface had returned, disturbed only by the fading wakes of her own ship and the dark smudges of oil and fire on the horizon. 25 minutes later, her sensors would register a series of massive secondary explosions from the Iranian coast as the Tomahawks arrived, precisely and mercilessly. The missile battery, its command bunker, its radar, and the infrastructure that supported it would cease to exist, erased not just from the tactical map in her CIC, but from the physical landscape.